What do writers have that others want? They want our stories, naturally. Writers, authors, scribblers, note-takers, and journalists create something out of nothing, and to others it feels like a magic hat trick, something they don't understand, but something they can steal. Hello and welcome back to my writing journey. I'm Ellen Byerrum. I write the Art Deco mysteries featuring Esme de la Forêt and Graydon Chase. The first book is Crook Tales for Two, and I am currently working on the second draft of book 2 in the series, These Crooked Things. I also write the crime of fashion mysteries, as well as plays, short stories, and the occasional children's book. I share my story every week in these videos, whatever turn it takes. If that sounds good to you and you see this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Feel free to comment. I also post them on Facebook and LinkedIn and other places when I remember to. Now, I don't offer the usual information on writing or 10 easy ways to improve your villain. That's so didactic. It strikes me as so weird. So paint by the numbers. Don't worry that your first plot point doesn't show up on page 13. Maybe it shows up on page 1. Maybe it takes you in a completely different direction than you had envisioned. Why are you thinking of fill-in-the-blank questions anyway, instead of your characters and the action that comes out of them? Now, when people read my books, people have said, "You have so many thoughts." Of course, I think, don't you have thoughts? And I had to look up the words, to which I say, "You're welcome." We call that vocabulary. Now, writers know this, but sometimes it helps to remember that we are the magic. We are the interpreters. We are the creators that create the narrative, especially when we are deep in the forest of woods, hacking away at the underbrush of sentences and lost plot fragments trying to make it through to the end. These are fraught days for writers, especially with the threat of AI hovering over us, artificial intelligence, stealing our work and our words without paying us and erasing the writer in the process. Gleefully, I might add. Back off, Zuckerberg. We also are competing with 1,000 day-to-day noises, stealing attention away from our books. People don't read as much or as often as they used to. And with self-publishing, much of it substandard, it has flooded the markets, making readers especially wary of trying new work. So why do writers write in the first place? I'm sure there are millions of reasons, and I am positively amazed when I hear there are writers who receive love and support from their families. Maybe they were born into families that understood writing and the arts. They were progeny of writers. As children, their works of art were proudly displayed on the refrigerator, the way people place magnets and notes there. Who are these magic families? Can I adopt one? Needless to say, nothing was allowed on our ancient yet pristine refrigerators in the homes I grew up in. It is amazing, though, to me how many writers' families had no faith in their progeny and insisted that writing is not a career or a calling. They lecture that you must have something practical to fall back on. I don't like this advice. I have known many writers, especially ones who became lawyers first, who were told that writing was just a hobby. How could they expect to live? These were playwrights and novelists, short story writers, essayists, but they were influenced by Mommy and Daddy, who preached the gospel of having something to fall back on. In other words, your parents expect you to fail, and they have no faith in you or your talent whatsoever. It's really a very tired story. And I heard a tale about Grace Kelly, the Oscar-winning actress turned Princess of Monaco. Unparalleled beauty. When she won the Oscar, her father, who was apparently a Class A jerk, supposedly said he was surprised it was Gracie. He always thought it would be her sister instead. Wouldn't you just slap him? Although every writer is different, we all have an origin story. Whether we were supported when we were young or completely discouraged from writing, we wielders of the pen have always had stories in our heads. They take up a lot of real estate Up there, that's where we have lived for many years. That's because we weren't encouraged elsewhere. Now, some families divvy up the roles in the family unit. In mine, one was designated as the singer, one as the one with all the personality and friends, another was the athlete. Why, she practically can fly. And let us not forget the Sun King who ruled over all. I was the designated servant who had to cook, clean, and took care of children. I hated it, absolutely, with every ounce of my being. If pressed, they might have described me as the one who reads. That didn't hold a flame to what I was supposed to do: cook, clean, slave. But I owe my very soul to reading and the nuns who taught me. The Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet saw something in me, something more than being a servant. They were the only ones I ever knew who told me I was intelligent. And I love them for it. They may be embarrassed by me now. You might not think that the illustrated lives of the saints is a subversive text. But think about being a mystery writer. That is where I first learned about horrible ways to die on one's mission to heaven. Saint Sebastian shot through with arrows. St. Lawrence died being roasted on a spit. Plus innumerable martyrs who faced the hungry lions, all in illustrations. Aside from all the religiosity, there were the questions of good and evil. Who were the villains? Could there have been another way out? I mean, they can't all just be slaughtered. I grew up to become a job safety and health reporter who learned the many terrible ways people die on the job. And they can all be murder. There are plots everywhere. I always had lots of stories in my head, and I never told my family about any of them. Why would I? I had very little of my own. My father stole my babysitting money until I quickly learned to hide it. A friend of mine who was a babysitter showed me where she hid her stash of money from her brother. And anything that was mine was open to plunder by my siblings, like those who stole my expensive shampoo I bought with my hard-earned money, and then they denied it. I once took a long trip, and the Sun King helped himself to my stereo. Also, at one time I did love to sew, but I was asked to make fancy dresses for my sisters because, I didn't come first. But I stopped sewing after my mother informed me she had let a cousin wear a brand new dress I'd made for myself. I complained I hadn't even worn it yet. And my mother said, "Oh, I know, but she saw it and she wanted it for a school dance." I couldn't say no. Why not? My childhood was a litany of no's. No, 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 no. I don't know what happened to that dress, but I never wore it. I never touched it again. I wanted nothing to do with it. Trust me, I was busy plotting my escape to college, which was the promised land and beyond. And life is full of truisms. One is that life interferes, the best laid plans and all that. I know so many people who became reporters and then never chose to spend their lives working for slave wages. Writing is a tangled path, full of thorns and weeds and hard, hard work, not a wealthy one. And so many people who wanted to be writers never managed it. And two, another truism, you should have something to write about. That's why many of us have to have a profession or life experience on which to draw our stories. Or you will wind up writing about nothing but your family, and believe me, you might think they're interesting, but nobody else does. Our experiences are vast and personal. We use them in our stories and our work. The written expression of our work, however, is copyrightable. So it is with extreme alarm that the orange-spewing virus in Washington has slithered his evil, destructive way into our precious Library of Congress. It is unclear if the orange spirochete, did you have to look that word up? You're welcome. It's wonderful. Does the orange spirochete even know what the LOC's purpose is? Or do his rancid advisors, the one particularly who looks like a snakehead? But yesterday, New York Representative Joe Morell, the top Democrat on the Committee on House Administration, issued this statement after Register of Copyrights and Director of the U.S. Copyright Office, Shira Perlmutter, was fired by Trump. days after he fired now former Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden. Morell said, Donald Trump's termination of Register of Copyright Shira Perlmutter is a brazen, unprecedented power grab with no legal basis. No legal basis. It is surely no coincidence he acted less than a day after she refused to rubber stamp Elon Musk's efforts to mine troves of copyrighted works to train AI models. Does this sound familiar? Morell didn't mention Meta's, Mark Zuckerberg's, theft of millions of fiction books to feed AI models without paying authors. Another billionaire nerd on an ego trip. That is the subject of a lawsuit. Obviously, I talked about this in my video a few weeks ago on Meta's not-so-great writer's heist. I'll try and link it in the description if I can. I interpret this rights grab as spoiled rich boys like Musk and Zuckerberg who want to legalize theft of writers' works, of our intellectual property, of our copyright. It is time to heft our pens, pencils, iPads, laptops, computers, and phones and get ready to write our outrage, to take action. Watch out, you Washington weasels. That's all I have for now. I'll see you next time, and I am penning my letter. Bye.